Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, March 7th, 2018. Tonight in Orlando, it is the conclusion of the She Believes Cup with United States national team, women national team, England national team, French national team, and Germany national team. And to talk about the She Believes Cup, Jonathan Tannenwald, who was earlier this week in New York to assist to the U.S. women's national team game. Jonathan, good morning.
Morning.
Jonathan, obviously a lot going on right now. We're going to start with the women's game. We haven't had a lot of time to talk about that in the recent days. Just give us a bit of the listener that hasn't really paid much attention to the She Believes Cup, give them a bit of an overview of what's happened so far to set them up for the final day of competition.
Yeah, the She Believes Cup, I'll take, I guess, I can start at 70,000 feet if you want instead of 5,000 feet. An annual round-robin tournament played with the United States, France, Germany, and England for the chief purpose of giving the United States 3 games against really good teams, but also for the purpose of giving the other teams very good games against other teams that are all with the benefit of being produced for international television and broadcasts and stuff like that, and it gets the exposure out a little bit. It's round robin. Tonight's the third sort of leg of the thing. They previously played in Columbus and in Harrison, New Jersey. I was in Harrison on Sunday to watch the United States tie France 1-1 and to watch Germany tie England 2-2. The U.S. plays England tonight. They're the two teams at the top of the group. England demolished France on the opening night, and the U.S. very narrowly edged Germany. So the U.S.-England game is for the quote-unquote title, whether it means anything. But nonetheless, it's going to be a big game.
Well, you mentioned that this has got the great TV values and things like that. Really helps to promote and put the game in its best, put its best face on the game. Meanwhile, Algarve is a lovely place to visit, but there's a hell of a game that no one can see today in terms of Sweden versus Netherlands, which is the darling of the women's game right now, the Dutch national team. So do you think that the future is to expand this She Believes Cup to maybe add another group of 4 teams, or are they pretty happy with that 4 teams sort of 3-game sprint and out?
I'd say a few things to that. I saw your conversation this morning, Duane, on Twitter with a good friend of mine, Michelle Morrison, who is a few miles down the road from me in the Philadelphia suburbs watching Mother Nature dump what could be 8 inches of snow on us today.
Lucky you.
Look, I don't think the She Believes Cup is going to expand for a few reasons. The most publicly important one of which is this simple little round-robin format works very well. It allows the tournament to be taken from, around 3 places and be done. And it's one night in each place, and it's a doubleheader, and you sell the tickets on the U.S. team and also try to convince the 20,000 fans or however many show up that they ought to stay for the other game. I don't think you're going to sell tickets for the other group. I just don't. Because you're barely going to sell tickets. If you had to put the games not involving the United States on their own tickets and they're not the World Cup, I don't think people are going to go.
I'm wondering.
I wish they would, but I don't think they are.
It's a very good point, and I'm wondering, Jonathan, if the quote-unquote training camp or the training camp atmosphere that we kind of get watching those exhibition tournament, because even though it's great teams and it's high level soccer, it still has a feel of a gala, an exhibition, and it's very hard to sell tickets nowadays in a very crowded sports landscape for exhibition matches, gala matches. The aspect of not necessarily competitive. Would this tournament benefit? Never mind the format, it could stay like this or it could change. Is a trophy, is an actual value, a bonus for the national team who wins this, money attached to this reward. Is there something that could be done to maybe get that exhibition aspect out of it? Because it's the same as Algarve in Cyprus every year. It's those tournaments have the same feeling, but I'm wondering if you truly want to draw the crowds, if you truly want to take this show on the road from Columbus to Harrison, New Jersey to Orlando and fill those stadium, if a competitive aspect would be maybe easier with the competitive aspect to sell this tournament to the fans.
I don't think so. The fans respond to two things. The United States women's team is in my city, or it's a World Cup or it's Olympics. And I think from the team's perspectives that are participating now, you talk about being a little bit of a gala, but they know that all three games are going to be of the highest level for all the teams involved. And the same goes for the Tournament of Nations in the summer with Australia, Brazil, and Japan. So, the teams that play are Sweden, which are not as good as they used to be, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Canada. Those are the four, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Well, the U.S. is always going to play Canada at some point during the year. Last year, they went to Europe and they played at Sweden. They had the Netherlands over. I'm sure they're going to try to get them again this year at some point. Because the Dutch are also Nike, so that can happen, And then, they've played Denmark a few times too. But look, I think it belies that the ultimate purpose of this thing really is to get the U.S. 3 good games in a week.
Yeah, and that is something that is happening when you're facing Germany, England, and France. Jonathan, I'm wondering, from what you have seen from this tournament, I'll move the conversation to the actual pitch itself.
Before you do, Kevin, I hate to cut you off, but
that's fine, go ahead.
I want to say one other thing about the Dutch very quickly. They don't have the name recognition yet on this side of the Atlantic. And by this side of the Atlantic, I also mean Canada. If you don't mind my saying so, Duane, I think if Canada plays France or Germany or England in women's soccer, people pay attention. If they play the Dutch, they'll say, okay, that's nice. They're the women's, the reigning women's European champions. But in terms of recognition, they aren't there yet. I got asked recently to do sort of a preseason prediction survey as a member of the NWSL Media Association. And I was asked, which one foreign player would you most like to see play in the NWSL?
I know you're going with that, yeah.
I said Wendy Renard. And I went through a long list of players in my mind with Renard, Jennifer Morojan, Viviane Miedema, Danielle Van de Donk, a number of other Dutch players who did well at the Euros. And I kept even also Melanie Behringer of Germany, who could have been the World Player of the Year last year very easily. I kept landing on Renard because ultimately, if you're bringing a foreign player over, you still need some of that star power, and Renard's got it more than almost anybody else in the European women's game still. And the Dutch players aren't there yet.
Yeah, it would make a big impact, especially on the pitch, which brings me to my next question, Jonathan. When you're looking at the She Believes Cup so far, the match the United States have played in the other tournament, is there one of those 4 teams that surprised you? We know the level of the 4 teams are really high. France, one of the best teams in Europe, same for England, and Germany's getting there really quickly. When you're looking at the tournament so far, is there one team that showed you more than you expected?
Well, they're all there. I think they're definitely all there. I think France is down to 6 at this point. Germany's number 2 and England's number 3. I think that I've been surprised twice by England that they smashed France 4-0, and that might not have been a fully representative France because this French team is pretty young. Then they came back and tied the U.S. 1-1, and everybody said, well, how could the U.S. not beat this French team that just got smashed by England 4-0? And the answer is that what we saw on Sunday was much more representative of what France are, and they also deliberately played a much more compact game on Sunday defensively. They were very spread out against England, and that's why they got run over. So England wins 4-0. That surprises me. I think people know I've been a skeptic of Phil Neville a little bit. Now I can't be quite so skeptical of him anymore when you do something like that. Then the England goes out and ties Germany 2-2, giving up 2 really bad goals on really bad defensive errors. So I don't know what England is right now. And I asked Phil Neville on Sunday evening, how are you going to play the U.S.? They're a team that likes to press high a lot. And you had some, defensive wobbles today. What do you think is going to happen? How are you going to do this? And he talked very much about wanting to instill a lot of mental strength in his team, but didn't say a word about the Americans. I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Phil Neville's strength as a manager will be more on the motivational side than he will be necessarily the tactical side. As far as thing you said, they had David Beckham in the dressing room pregame as well, which I think speaks to another thing that he can do is to bring attention to that program, which I'm not going to dismiss.
He cares though. He does care.
Yeah, I think that when he was announced that there was a lot of knee-jerk kind of reaction against him that assumed certain things, but certainly I think that he's proven that he cares a little bit here. The tactical wherewithal is the question I have there. But I want to go back. You mentioned the Netherlands a little bit, and I know they're not at this tournament. You're not watching them directly, but I am curious to ask you, because I don't think I ever have, where you think that team is in the world pecking order right now, not amongst understanding amongst general fans, but in terms of how legitimate they are as a contender next year in France. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think they're up there. I think they're very up there. They're 7th in the FIFA rankings right now.
Yeah.
And Duane, tell me, where are they in the Algarve Cup at this point?
They're going to play Sweden today for the championship, and they've been the best team now.
If they win the thing, and if they win and Germany beats France, I think the Dutch might jump France in the FIFA rankings. The margin is, I don't know all the math. The margin is the French have 2,019 points and the Dutch have 1,972. 19 and 28 is
just a tad under 100, yeah.
No, it's. I'm sorry. I've not been up for all that long. My math is poor this morning. I'm sorry.
It's about 60 or something, but yeah, hashtag math.
It's not a huge gap, is my point. So I would not be surprised if maybe the Dutch jump France in the next FIFA rankings, and then I think that's where things start to get very interesting.
So there's a doubleheader, Orlando Stadium today, 4 p.m. Eastern Time and 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the 2 games of the She Believes Cup. That wraps up today. Jonathan, as well, yesterday was announced the 2018 first Player of the Week from the NASR, the North American Soccer Reporters, which you are the president. And it was announced yesterday that Danny Hosen of the San Jose Earthquake is our first 2018 Player of the Week.
If you keep saying nice things about me being the president, I'm going to blow the lid off the 2 of you also being in the organization.
I voted.
I did something on my ballot this week that I'm not sure I've ever done before in all the years I've been in the NASR. I put 2 defenders on it. I voted for Laurent Simon. And the reason why I voted at first, and then the Milton Valenzuela, the Columbus outside back second. I will peel back the curtain a little bit here, and I suppose make a little bit of news and doing so. In the time that I've been the president of the NASR this year, my biggest goal has been to grow the membership of the organization, and we've added nearly 140 members, certainly over 130 so far, which I'm very happy about. One of the things that helps with that is you get a lot more people voting for Player of the Week than we used to, which is good because I think that a larger electorate makes it more representative. Now, obviously, not all of it's not geographically balanced, but it's a lot of people who do pay attention. But what we haven't quite overcome yet, and this happens all the time. It has happened for years, and I don't think it has just happened with the NASR. It is a condition of the soccer media in many, many places. If a player scores 2 goals, they're almost a lock to win Player of the Week unless somebody else scored 2 goals or somebody else scored 3. And so I didn't vote for Hosen in part because he did what he did at home and in part because he did it against a bad team. I voted for Simon because he took LAFC into Seattle in their first ever game and beat them. And I voted for Valenzuela because he took Columbus into Toronto and beat them.
I would have voted for Archer when it comes to Columbus, but that's just me, Jonathan. No, you're absolutely right. There almost needs to be a second award, some kind of like non-scorer Player of the Week. I don't know whether.
Oh, look, it's difficult to judge defenders. We know this. The statistics are not there. I'll usually, if I get to a point where I'm thinking about voting for a defender, and I will say something nice about MLS here for a brief moment. You can play the robot sound effects if you like. The heat maps that they provide from Opta are very good, and they do help you understand what a defensive player does in a game. The number of tackles, the number of passes, the amount of ground covered, etc. I wish the NWSL would give us the same data every week, and I don't just mean us, the media, I mean us, the public, as a whole. They have it because they have an opportunity with Opta. They have a partnership, I should say, with Opta. And I'd like to see that happen. Hopefully down the road it will. But if you go look, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that data is invaluable if you care about the game, if you want to understand the game. The stuff that you can get just publicly is remarkable. So yeah, that would really be a benefit to the women's game for sure. Jonathan, you continue.
Yeah, I expected LAFC to lose. I think almost all of us expected LAFC to lose. And they did not. And, Carlos Vela showed his quality and Diego Rossi showed his quality. And if Diego Rossi scores a few more goals like that, I think it's going to get a lot of attention.
I won $75 betting on LAFC because the first rule of week 1 of MLS is to expect the unexpected. That's the entire nature of my handicapping in that particular case, Jonathan, though. I wanted to ask you, before I let Kevin jump in for the next question, about the crew situation a little bit. Just in a general thought, because you're not a lawyer, we're not lawyers, so we don't expect a legal opinion here. But in terms of the filing that went, the Modell law filing that went through the other day, what are your general thoughts on that as a strategy in the Save the Crew movement, and will the crew be saved, in your opinion, based on what you're seeing so far?
I have no idea if the crew are going to be saved, but I do get the distinct impression that Anthony Precourt is feeling a bit of heat. Because Austin seems to Austin seems to not entirely want him, at least on his terms. And the question that I have had for a long time, I was in New York yesterday for reasons that we can get into in a moment, and I stopped by MLS for a few minutes, and Don Garber was out of town. He was at some meetings in Miami, pertaining not to the Beckham MLS bid, pertaining to some other television-related things. What I would like to know, and I have not had the opportunity to ask this yet, is what specifically needs to happen, or do you want to see happen, for the crew to stay in Columbus? What are the things concretely that Garber is looking for? Because I don't think we really know. And look, I'm sure that give us a 100% publicly funded stadium as a sweetheart deal would go a long way in whatever site anybody prefers, downtown or whatnot. I sense it's something more than that, and I can't quite figure out what it is. And until we have the answer to that question, I think that I think there's a lot unknown, not just a simple answer.
Jonathan, let me ask you a question. I certainly remember when San Jose had threw the keys on the table. They moved that team to Houston. They held that spot for a while, and then eventually put a team back in there once they figured the stadium stuff out. Is that a possible solution to this? Not solution to Columbus fans, I'm sure, but that they hold the market and give it something down the line, or are we too far along in terms of expansion fees for them to do something similar to what they did with the earthquakes back in 2005?
No, I don't think so, and I think Cincinnati is the reason. Why would you hold a team for Columbus if you want MLS in Cincinnati, which is an hour and a half down the road?
Who's to know?
And tell me this too. This is a nuclear option, no doubt, what I'm about to tell you. But tell me why, in all of this, if you are trying to make the numbers work in terms of the number of teams in the league, the amount of expansion, so on and so forth, why would you not sit the owners of FC Cincinnati down in a closed-door room with Anthony Precourt and say, you two work it out, figure out what the reasonable price is so that the Precourt is getting his money's worth and Cincinnati is not paying a discount to get into the league. And if there's really, if it's really that much of a problem, then instead of moving the crew to Austin, move them to Cincinnati and have them effectively be the Cincinnati, have FC Cincinnati absorb the crew. It's an option that's out there that is imperfect because it doesn't keep them in Columbus, but wouldn't it be better to have them an hour and a half away than half the country away?
Yeah, you would think. You would think it would be the right solution, and like I was talking yesterday,
I don't know that it's the right solution, but
well,
Duane,
it's a solution. It's a solution. They're better than none, right?
Yeah, we'll call it the MK Don solution.
Well, but at least at least Cincinnati isn't Milton Keynes in terms of being a place that is alleged to have no soccer fans.
Fair enough.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much for your time today. Before we say goodbye, what's in your soccer agenda today? Are you focusing on the CCL tonight, Champions League this afternoon? What is on your soccer agenda today?
My soccer agenda right now is the state of the 2026 World Cup bid.
Oh.
I was in New York. The reason why I was in New York yesterday, or one of them at least, is that Telemundo, the Spanish language television network in the United States that is broadcasting the 2018 World Cup as well as 2022 and 2026, had a sort of a hype event yesterday, it being 100 days before the World Cup started. Fox also had a few things in New York. TSN did not have anything in New York. Duane, did they have anything in Toronto?
Not that I'm aware of. No, there was no press release that went out. No.
Okay. And while I was there writing about their various plans that they've announced and their advertising sales and all the other little things that they had to talk about, I asked the president of their sports division, as well as their legendary broadcaster Andres Cantor, what they think of the fact that the 2026 World Cup bid is in a bit of rough water right now, as we have seen in the reporting from ESPN. And I will say that what ESPN reported on last week when they first blew the lid off this thing was something of an open secret among the international soccer media. It is something that I had heard from many people, and Duane and Kevin, I'm sure you did too. I'm not going to repeat chapter and verse all of the allegations. Folks can go to my Twitter feed, and I think they can probably figure out from that and from reading the story why the bid is in hot water. It's fairly straightforward, all things considered. But I would allow me to read a couple of quotes to you. One is from Ray Warren, the president of Telemundo's sports division. There's a lot of other issues at the forefront of these decisions that, as a sports guy, I don't really want to talk about, that might be causing people to think about where they want to play the 2026 World Cup if they have to make a decision in the next 2 years, which they do. He talked about how, the changes in the voting so that now all of the member associations are voting, which we thought at the time was going to be a good idea and might now backfire on the North American bid for reasons that are beyond the bid's control for the most part. Warren noted that it's a pretty strong argument to say if you really want to grow the game in the host country, having the World Cup in the U.S. will probably help you, which is correct. And this happened a few hours before the bid committee changed its leadership structure. Sunil Gulati is no longer the head of it. It's now officially jointly co-chaired by Stephen Reed of the CSA, Carlos Cordero, the new president of U.S. Soccer, and Desta de Maria, who is the president of the Mexican Federation through the end of the World Cup. So Andres Cantor said, I would be surprised if the U.S. is not awarded the World Cup in 2026. And obviously, if it's not, it will be a clear non-sporting message. It will be more of a political statement from the FIFA federations that they are not in agreement with what's going on politically. But this is all the infrastructure. This is the country, the continent, that has all the infrastructure, including Canada and Mexico, to host a World Cup with 48 teams. The world of sports is sometimes intertwined here with politics, and everything that's going on here doesn't help. Andres also noted a certain remark that a certain president of the United States made about certain countries voting for on the World Cup bid, and how many of them, especially the ones in Africa, are not going to vote for the North American bid. I'm not going to repeat the quote verbatim because I don't want your podcast to have an expletive label on it. But I think people know what the word is, and I did print it in the story if they want to go read it. Duane, I'm not against the idea of going to 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico. But I would like to know this. Has Stephen Reed said a word?
No, there hasn't been any comment up here, and I've been trying to find anyone to talk to me about the possibility of them trying to push forward for that. I do think it is a pretty natural solution, but possible Band-Aid to get around some of those issues, to play up the fact that, and the U.S. is upfront about the fact that they included Canada and the United States in this bid, partly to get around those political issues, which exist even before Mr. Trump, right? That exasperates it when you have a gentleman like that in the office, but certainly even before that, there are always going to be anti-American sentiment out there, and that's one of the reasons that Canada and Mexico have been included in this. But no, to answer your question directly, I have not heard anything from the CSA. They're pretty focused on getting that league launched right now, more than anything else. But for this country up here, if that bid fails, then that's a lot of their strategy out the window in a puff of air.
Would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and 15 each in Canada and Mexico, would 50 games in the United States and would it not help the CSA if they said a word or two? They're not even about the allocation of games, but just about maybe a few more things here and there about the fact that they are trying to get a World Cup to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, look, they do talk about that out there, but the problem is that the market that they're talking to is very much in the bubble, to the point that when the cities are approving their, the city of Toronto approved the fact that they're going to commit X amount of dollars to hosting games here in 2026 about a month and a half ago. And the reaction, if you read the comments, which is always a mistake, but if you read the comments, it was like half the city had no clue that this was going on, which has been common knowledge amongst us in the bubble for months, which tells me that they're not doing a good enough job to get that message out there that this is a bid that's happening, because still is that perception whenever it does float out to new people that are exposed to it. They still react to, what the hell do you mean we're putting for the World Cup? That's ridiculous. We suck at soccer, which is kind of simplistic, but it's what happens. So yeah, they could do a better job. The CSA could do a better job in a lot of fronts, but here we are.
Well, I will say I think that down here, obviously there's social media and so on. But I also, all of the major cities down here know that the United States is bidding for the World Cup because all of the major cities have tried to host, tried to get in line to host games.
Yeah, there's lack of a competitive. There's not as much competition up here, right? There's not as much competition. So you're not having that same sort of internal battle for the spots. I mean, it was obvious that the major cities were going to be put forward in that. I mean, there was some, Calgary not bidding was something that caused a little bit of interest up here, but it wasn't an internal debate that went beyond the soccer community. So yeah, it's just a different culture that way, yeah.
And do I read the schedule on the CSA's website correctly? That at least as of now, barring potentially the Voyageurs Cup whenever it ends up being played, nobody from the CSA is going to be in front of a microphone officially until June 10th when Canada plays Germany and Hamilton.
That sounds about. They've been hiding since the John Herdman. They
I wonder why.
Well, anyway, yeah, we might get access to Herdman on a conference call in the next week or so, in the next break. That's the fingers crossed on that one, but we haven't heard anything for sure yet. So there you go. And this Canadian Premier League is operating almost as its own separate thing at this point too. So it's not like we're getting much information from anywhere, but here we are. And it is all fun. No one's really paying attention to the fact that Canada also lost 3-1 to Sweden and barely beat Russia in a penalty shootout in Algarve. But
exactly.
Here we are.
Christine Sinclair, though.
Yeah.
She is going to probably break that, right? Well, yeah, I that is important, I think, to the growth of the game to have her compete for that record. That is a marketing opportunity. I'm not going to crap on that, but if it's done in isolation with the teams going backwards, it doesn't really mean much, right?
Your countrymen and women do like telling off Abby Wambach, that's for sure.
Yes, it's a new sport here in Canada. Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, thank you very much for your time today, Jonathan. You can follow Jonathan on Twitter at The Goalkeeper. We will be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Tonight, Toronto, BMO Field, CONCACAF Champions League. It's the first leg of the quarterfinals between Tigres and TFC. Duane, are you nervous yet?
That would imply no. I'm not nervous. Having watched a bit of the New York Tijuana game last night, I mean that should give some TFC fans hope, although it's different circumstances, different plays, obviously. I'm excited to watch a high-quality team, but at the same time, it's a weird sort of situation, and I think I blame this to the style, the way that the CCL works nowadays. It's just, I hate it. Like, it takes all of the momentum away.
It's not a league. It's not a league. Yeah. I agree.
It's a playoff in the middle of the start of your season. It's like the CCC again. And look, I mean, I understand why it's happening, but it used to be exciting, like CONCACAF nights, because you'd be in the middle of the season and like, oh, we've got a game on Wednesday, and you're already in the momentum of going, and you'd go watch this funny team come in, and you'd have fun. And yes, there's smaller crowds, but that almost made it better. It made it more like a secret club, right? So
Duane, are you saying that now it's like the underground music that's not underground anymore? You don't think it's cool anymore because it's not just yours?
Well, it's still not cool.
I think it's cool. I've been to a final. It's cool. This tournament is what you make out of it. It's the team's decision what this tournament is. That's how I view it. And when you're looking at Tigres TFC tonight, that's a pretty marquee matchup. That's a pretty big game. That's a pretty big matchup, and it's only the quarterfinals. I think that is the game that will make this tournament.
Football is first.
Exactly, and a CONCACAF football is first, if you heard that in the background. But yeah, it is. Yes, I like it. It is that, but in terms of like its ability to reach out and grab hold of the attention of the average fan, it's just simply has never succeeded in that.
But is it
if they're going to go this far?
Like, is it made for the average fan, or is it made for you and I? That's what I'm wondering. It's like we're always there complaining, oh, it's not like the UEFA Champions League people. Yeah, but it's not that. It's not about them. Even UEFA Champions League, take half the people who watch it on TV trying to name them 3 players of each team. They won't be able to. This is for us, and sometimes we should like what we like, and who cares about others?
No, but they still, like, if you want the competition to continue, the reason it's important for it to grab hold of the average person, for those of us who like the competition, is that the reason that they are downgrading first they went from 4-team groups to 3-team groups, and now they've got rid of the groups altogether, right? The reason for that is because it doesn't make money. And they need to reduce they can't justify it. They can't justify the interruption in the season if they're not also going to make money off of it. They need to have a competitive structure to allow teams to advance to the World Club Cup, which we can argue about its importance down the line, but they're going to go as simple as possible. And until it gets the attention of the people, it will continue to just shrink. It might go down to 8 teams.
I agree, but technically it's not smaller. It's actually bigger. Just because our teams were not part of the first round of it doesn't make it necessarily smaller. There was a lot of games this fall to get one team to qualify for this knockout tournament, and there was some expense, and there was some games played. They were transmitted, they were streamed, they were on Facebook and YouTube and other social media. There were some coverage, there were people hired to do them, there were referees to do them. So the costs were still there for those games. It's a bigger tournament than smaller at the same time, the way you mention it. But it's not necessarily more cost-effective now. It's probably even cost more money than it did in the years prior because of the 2 format. You have to change everything. I think, though, sometimes we have to take things for what they are. And this is a tournament, for lack of other options, to determine the best club in our continent. And until there's another choice, I will take this winner of this tournament as maybe not being the best team in our continent, but at least it's up there.
No, look, yeah, absolutely. But to get to the game tonight, look, there's a lot of trepidation here in Toronto, but it's based on the way that the season has started, right? Like, they haven't been able to produce any offense, and the belief is that if you're going to get past to Tigres, you're going to need to win your first leg by multiple goals. Although, as we said, New York sort of turned that in its ear last night with the win over Tijuana. Now, albeit it was the win in exactly the same way you'd expect any CONCACAF team or any MLS team to beat a Mexican team in Mexico. They got a couple poacher goals and held on for dear life and had a great goalkeeper performance. But nonetheless, they got the 2-0 win in Mexico. They can now try and hold on and get the win to finish that off and get to the semifinals. I don't know how to handicap tonight. I honestly don't, because TFC has not looked great at the 2 home games it's played. But at the same time, I do look at this team and say, well, Tigres hasn't been playing particularly well. They have great talent. Oh my God, there's so much talent in that roster. When you start to really look at it and look at all the players they have, like Mexican internationals, French internationals, they've got, like, my God, it's like, how can TFC possibly compete? But then, this is a team in TFC that's been together more or less for 3 years. They're trying to work some new parts in right now, which I think is maybe part of the struggles. It'll be interesting to see. It's going to be, we might get an orange ball tonight. That should be fun. There is a call for snow in the area. Jonathan touched on the snowfall that they're getting down there. We won't quite be getting that kind of fall here, but it is calling for an 80% chance of snow tonight. Going to be -2, -3 down there before the wind chill, so it's not going to be warm. That could be an advantage to the Canadian team as well. So we'll see. Excited, yeah. The more I talk about it, the more I am. It is the best team that we will have seen at BMO Field probably in 5 or 6 years. So that is something to look forward to if you're a football fan in a general way.
I was going to say the best team at BMO Field since last fall when Montreal went to BMO Field. But that's maybe not. No, you're right. I'm excited for those games, yeah. I'm excited for eventually maybe seeing a equal matchup between MLS and Mexican team. Yes, last night was similar. But in the way it happened, it's like the team going on the road, getting the result, and holding on for dear life. It's not necessarily what we want to see. And I feel tonight, we're not going to see Toronto just trying to hold on for dear life. They're going to take advantage of the home field advantage, take advantage of the weather, and especially the temperature, which usually Mexican teams don't travel well when it's north and northern conditions. So that's interesting. And we'll have more details on tomorrow's show about tonight's CCL matchup. As always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can find every on-demand version of our podcast on sportspodcastingnetwork.com and as well on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, anywhere you get your podcasts. Just look for the Sports Podcasting Network. As always, thanks, Duane, for your time. I'm Kevin Laramee. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.